All right, good morning and welcome everybody for coming along to our webinar today. My name is John-Daniel Trask. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Raygun, and I am joined today by Nick Harley from our marketing team. I say hi, Nick.
Hi, everyone. Good to join you on this one, JD.
Yeah, thanks. And today's webinar, I'm going to be talking a bunch about how to do deployment tracking, so tracking the releases of your software using Raygun. By default, this is not something you necessarily have to set up, but it's something that's really cool when it is set up for helping better understand the health of your software. So I'll just, hopefully the screen share is showing for everybody, and I'll click through some slides at the start. And then we're going to be looking at a demo within Raygun, both of what deployment tracking looks like when it is set up, and I'll also be doing a bit of a walkthrough of how you go about setting it up, showing you where some of the documentation is, and a couple of small little gotchas that may crop up for various different programming languages that are out there. So here's the agenda, how we do it at Raygun, which may be quite different to how you do things at your organization. Why is it important? Look at that demo, and then answer any questions if there are any. So without further ado, we'll start. So at Raygun, we've been deploying code multiple times a day. We use Octopus Deploy, a fantastic product built across the Tasman in Australia. So you can probably tell from my accent, we're in New Zealand. So, you know, a lot of respect for the other people in the South Pacific building developer tools. And generally what we have is all of our different projects, they're all set up so that they're continuously building using TeamCity by JetBrains. We've used that for years, and then when we're looking to do a deployment to production, you can set up a release using Octopus Deploy. That's not to say we only deploy to production with Octopus. We also deploy to what we call our office environment, which is a sort of first stage staging area. Then we have a beta environment, and then we also go to full production as well in there. And all of those builds come off TeamCity as well. And that's been working really well for us for many, many years. We're a .NET shop, effectively. All of the back end of Raygun is built in .NET, and Octopus in particular started off life with a lot of support in the Microsoft realm. They've now branched out, of course, so if you haven't looked at that product, I highly recommend it. And so we automate that build process and deployment. We also do a bunch of operations work using Slack. So what do I mean by that? Means that when we have pushes to production, there's notifications that are going into our ops channel to say who and what version into what environment was pushed. So I could see, for example, that perhaps Nick might have pushed something to our public website. And that way, just if something kind of goes bang shortly after that, you know, we can all point at Nick and figure out what's going on. We, of course, then use Raygun crash reporting in all of this so that we can then see if we've done a deployment and errors start coming through, very quickly we can either choose to roll back if it doesn't look like something that's going to be quick to fix, or, you know, hopefully roll forward to victory if it's an easy enough thing to fix. So that's how we kind of do things at Raygun. I know everybody does things differently, especially these days when you're starting to get really cool stuff like Kubernetes and trying to manage fleets of things. So Raygun deployment tracking will actually work with all these different scenarios, as you'll see a little bit later on as well. And yes, then note when we do make mistakes, having Raygun in the mix helps us understand that very quickly. And today I'm going to talk quite heavily as well around deployment tracking being tied to the crash reporting product that we offer. However, we are doing a range of work with deployment tracking to start highlighting things like performance changes that happen when you're using real user monitoring. So you might do a deployment and find that, for example, there's no new bugs introduced, but maybe the user experience, you know, has gotten worse because it now takes half a second longer to load each web page, those sorts of things. And of course, our APM product, which is in beta, also is looking to have deployment tracking baked in, so you can really understand the quality of each push that you're doing. Both on the server side performance story, the front end with RUM, and the crashes with Raygun. So what makes it important? It's really valuable to be able to see that you've introduced a new error. So if you're using Raygun crash reporting today, you'll know that you get those notifications that say, hey, Nick, we've just seen this new error. You should probably go and look at it. However, that's kind of something that you have to be paying a bit of attention to really appreciate that as those notifications come through. While deployment tracking is going to allow you to actually go and say, let me look at a given release that we did and show me what the issues were that were introduced in that release. So you can go back and look at that without having to remember, when did I see this and what was the version number? Obviously, it's useful to track against a given deployment. What are the things that we've fixed in this release? And usually my favorite one, what are the issues that we've regressed? So if we do a new deployment and things have gone backwards, we want to know that it went backwards in a given release that we made. And then, of course, being able to dig even deeper to see what maybe was the code change that caused that issue to regress. So all of these things are about trying to improve your turnaround, understand the health of a given release, and be able to resolve those issues even faster than before. And always peace of mind. So how do we go about getting this set up? Well, fortunately, it's a pretty straightforward process. So I might just jump out here because that's pretty much the end of my slide deck. And I'll just go to the demo part of the application. So you're all pretty familiar with the Raygun crash reporting view here. So first of all, deployment sits down in the sidebar here. So it's an application-specific tracking feature. And I've already got this set up in that app, but I've jumped to another one where I haven't got it set up. So you'll see what you have when you haven't set this up. And you get this view here. And so it talks a little bit about some of the benefits, and there's some documentation links in here for various different environments. So what you're doing is effectively baking into your deployment pipeline the ability to ping Raygun and say, hey, we've just done this deployment. Here's some information about it. And then we collect that up and we do some magic with that at the web app end at our side to make sure that we can tell you all of those things about what's regressed, what's new, and all of that. So I do have the documentation open just to give you a quick sort of walkthrough here. So you see there's a few other different examples that we have in here, but on the whole, the deployments API is something that's really quite simple to call. So you could be triggering this with a simple curl command or something else like that. If there's anything not listed in here or you would like some help getting deployment tracking set up, always remember to hit the Contact Raygun link inside the app, and one of our team will always be happy to help. But I just thought I'd scroll down and give you an idea of what gets sent. So you've got a pretty straightforward endpoint there, and then a little bit of data. And so you can see the API key for the application, the version number for the application, basically the people details, so owner name, email address, any comments that may be coming from your deployment. So in our case, if you've written a comment saying this release contains this, this, and this, you can include that. Then these bits here are quite interesting. So this is the source control management identifiers, and this is what allows us to then connect to pull in things like commit information into Raygun for a given release. So this is speeding up your ability to go, oh, maybe we introduced a regression in this release, but now I want to kind of go and see what was the code that actually changed. So we can actually pull in that commit information for you so that you can jump straight through to the various providers that we support there, whether that be GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. So I've got these ones at the moment. We do get a lot of requests as well for VSTS. That's something we're looking at adding shortly. So this is the really high level stuff that comes in, and then you can jump through to these other pages here for specific examples. So I might just jump to PowerShell for a second to kind of show that we provide you with a script. It's pretty straightforward to get that set up and running, and away you go. So that's pretty easy. Usually one of those sorts of things you could probably save for like a Friday afternoon and just slip it in there. So I'm going to jump back here and show you how this looks. So this is the demo application that we use when we're demonstrating Raygun. So everything you see here is completely fake, no PII data in here, not leaking anything, but it tells a story. So first thing you may notice that you might not see on your own crash reporting dashboard is this little bar here. And so what this is showing is the deployments that have gone out at a given time. And so in this demo, I only have one in the last 6 months, but you can see here our error rate was relatively low, kind of came down, and then it looks like it's jumped right up again. And so it's really useful to have a bar that kind of goes, okay, something happened here. And if I click on this here, you'll see that I can see the deployments. If there were multiple stacked up in the time window, you'd actually see them all in here. And you can see the version number as well. So what does this do when I click on this? Well, if I jump through onto that version, you'll see here that it's taken me to the deployment tracking for this version, and it's saying, well, we didn't actually introduce any new errors in this deployment, but we did introduce some pretty horrible regressions. And so these are the exact crash reports that have basically come back to life. These were the ones that were already occurring. We hadn't fixed them in a previous release. This list can usually get pretty long. I tend to just kind of ignore the still occurring, but the ones that were brand new and the regressions are always really important to keep an eye on. You've got the note tab here. So this was the comment that was coming through on that deployment call. And then under commits, you can see here that we've got the links, and down in the bottom left corner there, you'll see that this is linking straight through to GitHub. So I can actually jump through and look at that code itself and see what's going on. And so this really is a useful view, something I tend to come and have a look at from time to time when I'm doing a deployment. I just keep a look at this page. Maybe I look at it 5 minutes after a deployment if something hasn't triggered on the crash reporting graph to give it away. But certainly is useful for seeing the health of what I've been doing. So that's the kind of key piece in there. If we jump back to the deployments page itself, and again, I've only got the one deployment showing. If I go to all time, which is what that briefly showed before filtering, you can actually see how many deployments you're doing. In this case, it's doing it by week, so there was one in there. But this can be also, I personally find this handy to just jump in and kind of say, what's our cadence for pushing? Are we pushing it 5 times a day, 10 times a week? What is it? And then you can see down here, you have this list of versions. So if we had more time in here, this would have a stream of all of the different deployments that we'd pushed, and we could go and start exploring the health of those. I'll just jump back to crash reporting dashboard again for a second, and I'll just bounce that back out to 6 months. Actually, I might still have it kicking around. Yep. Also worthy of note is that if you have deployment tracking set up and you don't see this bar, there is actually an option to turn that on and off under there. So it may just be turned off if you do have deployment tracking set up in there as that. Now, a couple of other things. This is not specific to the deployment tracking side, but is just some gotchas, some common issues that you may run into when you want to look at setting up deployment tracking. The first one is to do with JavaScript. So as everyone's aware, JavaScript is getting used more and more. We've got richer and richer front ends and all that good stuff. However, you may, for the astute person watching, have noticed that in our documentation, we wanted to get a version number in here as well. So JavaScript doesn't have an implicit version number. Almost every other programming language that Raygun supports, you can usually pull in the version number of the code that's executing. It's an implicit thing that's available, but it's not in JavaScript. Pardon me. So how do we resolve for this? So in our Raygun for JS SDK, you do have the ability to call set version. Now, this does have the slight challenge that you need to be maintaining a version number somewhere. We definitely prefer working with semantic versioning because we can do things around saying resolved in version, and I'll touch on that in a second. But calling this will allow you to version that. So hopefully you can put in place a system where in your build server, perhaps you can pull in an environment variable that may be saying, hey, this was the version of the build that we were doing, and I'm going to call this set version function. That way, when it's coming through to Raygun, we can definitely tie a given error through to a given deployment or release that you've done. So that's something that's quite helpful to do in JavaScript land. As I mentioned, almost every other programming language, Java, .NET, all of those good things, they actually allow you just to pull the version automatically, and our SDKs will go and pull that version automatically in there. So there's that. And my last sort of point around just managing releases and trying to understand how you can make your life better is if you're building for mobile environments, so iOS, Android, that sort of thing, even if it's Xamarin, let's say you've got a bug like this and we've now resolved it. This is what resolved inversion is for. So if you click on this, you can see that we could say that we fixed this in version 2. So why is this valuable? This is really useful from the standpoint of in mobile land, as much as we would like all of our customers to upgrade to the latest version the second we push it out, many people don't. And there's always a long tail of laggards that do not ever upgrade. So they may not move off, say, version 1. We know we fixed this in version 2, and so it bounces over to that resolved tab. What this will then do is say that if we see this error again, we won't automatically bounce it back to active unless the error has occurred in a newer version or does occur in version 2. Then it will be a regression. So that will also flow through the deployment tracking. And so this can be a really useful way of quickly going through your active list when you're deploying code and saying, okay, well, we have resolved this, we'll move it over there, and not coming back here and polluting it and helping improve the signal to noise ratio for yourself in there. So again, if there's any questions about how to work with that resolved inversion, shoot us a note. We can also set up training sessions with your team if that would help to make life a little bit easier. And that also flows through into the deployment tracking that I talked about as mentioned. Cool. So this webinar today is a relatively short one, just covering a little bit about how that deployment tracking system can help. As I mentioned, we are looking at adding a whole range of new capabilities to the deployment tracking around performance monitoring, so seeing those regressions around performance or even the improvements, hopefully. But that's going to be coming soon. Having said that, with them coming soon is there's probably going to be no need to actually change anything about the deployment tracking setup to get those features rolling in there, because all we really need to understand is that there was a deployment and this is the version, and then we can pull the performance data, the crash data, and all of that together into that section of the application to help you out. Cool. So with that, I'm basically at the end. Not sure if there were any questions there, Nick, or not. It's pretty short.
Not on the actual webinar, no. But people can hit contact Raygun in the sidebar of the app or email us at support@raygun.com if they need help getting set up. Also, if you've got any ideas for future webinars or you want to hear from us, then happy to kind of see what people would like to have us cover.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of features in Raygun that are sort of just under the covers there outside of the standard sort of setup process. And we are doing these based on customer requests and whatnot. So do yell out if there's anything you'd like us to talk about. Nick's going to get these up online as well. So if you're here and it might be useful for somebody else on your team to watch these or be of help to getting things set up, they can jump in onto those. And I think, Nick, you send an email on those afterwards, don't you?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Appreciate your time this morning or evening or wherever you are in the world. I hope you have a great day. So thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. Bye.